Hello there! It's Friday, which means it's time once again for the best movie podcast ever, the only movie podcast to offer objective and hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. I am your host, the podcaster with no name, Konrad, and with me as always, he's addicted to you and you know that you're toxic, it's Anthony James.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night. I love these quotes. These quotes are coming out of everywhere.
I've taken the gloves off for these quotes now. At first I was like, you know what, I'm going to try and keep the quote relevant to the movies. Well, actually no, I'll take a step back from that. That quote is relevant to a movie we will discuss this week.
Okay.
But it's also obviously a line from a Britney Spears song as opposed to a song from a movie. So, you know, I'm a man of the arts. You know, I can't be constrained.
Yeah, no. I'm happy with that. Actually, it reminds me that I do need to watch the documentary series about Britney Spears. Can't remember.
Yes.
Finding Britney Spears? I don't know what it's called. So some word Britney Spears. They're all called something like that.
It sounded like it might have been a bit of a hit piece based on her response to it.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I know nothing else about it except for that some people that I know who've watched it came out of it very sympathetic towards her. So that's...
Oh, okay. Maybe I've misremembered that. I thought I read somewhere that she said she watched it and it made her quite upset. But maybe that's just because it's depicting
her traumatic
things in
events.
her life, that are traumatic. Other than that, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Busy back at work again, and trying to watch as many movies as I can. This week I haven't. We'll talk about it later, but I haven't done so well. We actually delayed the podcast for a day because I needed to watch another movie. But then news of a football Super League came out, and I was like, well, I'm just watching this on repeat for the next...
Yeah, watching the death of football as we know it. And
just
then
refreshing.
Yeah. And then suddenly it was pulled back from the brink by Sky Sports, I guess. I don't like rooting for Sky Sports. It feels like, better the devil you know kind of situation, really.
Like, I sent my brother a voice message, and it just said, I love the idea of these pundits being on Sky Sports, like, saying how terrible of an idea it is. And then, like, if anyone doesn't know, like, they're going to make a European Super League, which is going to be the death of football. That's all you need to know. Yeah. And basically, I just sent my brother a voice message saying, it's funny that all these pundits are saying how it's the death of football and, like, it's terrible. But we all know if this happens next year, it's going to be like, welcome to Sky, the home of the European Super League.
Yeah, and it's a little bit rich for Sky to talk about, like, bold-faced greed when it comes to football, when they're just like, yeah, we've had a monopoly on the games for, I don't know, the best part of 30 years now. But as I say, better the devil you know, and we're back to just hating our football teams for other reasons rather than for European Super League reasons. For those of you who are new to the show, we're not talking about football this week. Maybe we will. I don't know. You're not the boss of me. But
we talked about football last week in the intro that I had to cut out, guys, because there was a recording error, but there was some football talk because my team beat Konrad's team, and I was very smug about it. So they didn't just beat us. They gubbed us, I believe, is what I would describe it as. So there was no audience listening to that because we had to cut it because of the recording issues. So therefore, I was just slagging off your team to your face, Konrad. I apologize for that now.
Yeah, well, I mean, we deserved it. We got a gubbing. But yeah, so if you're new to the show, we are doing a movie diary this week where we talk about all the movies we have seen since the last time we did one of these, which was only a week ago. We may have... I'm still trying to figure out the scheduling of it, but we may have a themed episode coming up. That's up
to me to sort of dot the T's and cross the I's there.
Yeah, but keep.
And just like that saying, I've screwed up the dotting of the T's and crossing of the I's.
No, it's perfect. It sounded very deliberate. It sounded like a humorous spoonerism.
Halfway through, it turned into that.
Well, that's therein lies the essence of comedy. So, movie diary this week. If you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so on YouTube. We are the Culture Cave, and on podcasting apps, we are the best movie podcast ever. Get involved in the comments. Let us know what you have watched this week and what you think of the movies that we're going to discuss. Give the show a like, really does help. But other than that, I say let's talk about some gosh darn movies.
Let's do it.
Movies, friends. We're here to talk about them. There've been some good ones for me this week. Anthony and I have just had a brief discussion off air about how we're going to structure this because I've got more than him.
Yeah, let's just be honest about it. Yeah.
Listen, there's no point hiding it. It's going to become self-evident. So if you don't like the sound of my voice in these podcasts, I apologise because you're about to hear a lot of it. But I'm gonna start us off, and I'm actually gonna start us off on a very positive note. I should say before we get into this movie that just a sort of general trigger warning for anyone who's kind of sensitive to discussions about like sexual assault. The movie that I'm about to talk about is basically entirely based on that. So,
Timestamps in the description if you want to skip the film.
Yeah, like we'll try to be as sensitive as possible, but there is like it's going to necessitate some discussion about it. So, the first movie that I wanted to talk about this week was one I've been meaning to watch for ages. I've heard it's great, and I've just it's not been available to me, and I've not gotten around to renting it. And that is 2020's Promising Young Woman, which was directed and written by Emerald Fennell, who I've never seen anything from before, and it's starring. I suppose you'd say Carey Mulligan is definitely the lead. Bo Burnham is kind of a co-ish lead. Yeah, he's like the romantic co-lead, but not really. And it has an absolute murderer's row of acting talent in it. Like the character actors who show up in this movie are off the hook in terms of quality.
Looks great, yeah.
And it's a very polarizing movie. So and I kind of understand why. So to briefly sort of establish what it's actually about. Basically, we join the story following Carey Mulligan's character Cassie, who's essentially going to clubs, pretending to be absolutely off her face drunk, getting guys to take her home, and then revealing herself to be sober to essentially shame them into changing their ways. And it's kind of played that coming into this, I was expecting it to be what's known as the subgenre is known as like rape revenge, which is essentially a woman it's a very schlocky kind of genre, which I believe came into existence in like the exploitation era in the 70s and 80s or early 80s, where a woman goes around killing men for like to exact vengeance for like a sexual assault that is visited on her. And that's kind of what I thought this was going to be, and to a certain extent it is that. In the early runnings of the film, where Cassie is meeting these characters, so we get Adam Brody from the OC is the first character who she humiliates. Then you get Christopher Mintz-Plasse, aka McLovin, who I feel really bad for him, but like I'm sure he's a good actor and he's been in lots of other stuff, but I will always think of him as McLovin.
McLovin will come back later.
Yeah. But so he's in it as well, and there is a sense of kind of triumph to her just humiliating these men. But then the movie like kind of brilliantly shifts into almost a romance where she meets Bo Burnham's character, who's a medical student that she went to school with, and we're like finding out through the movie that she was in medical school. She dropped out for some reason, and there's this other character called Nina who we suspect something horrible happened to, and she dropped out because basically no one took what Nina was saying seriously, and she took it upon herself to try and sort of exact revenge for what happened to her. And she runs into Bo Burnham's character, and it kind of turns into a romantic comedy almost. And then it stopped very explicitly. I don't want to get into spoilers here, but about 2/3 of the way through the movie, it very explicitly stops being a romantic comedy because of developments in how involved Bo Burnham's character was with the sexual assault that took place of her friend. And it becomes, it kind of goes back into revenge territory, but it's a very, very funny movie. Carey Mulligan is incredible in it, and it has to strike this incredibly fine balancing act in trying to be funny while also depicting an incredibly bleak subject matter. And I think it's very polarizing, because when it comes to rape revenge movies, a lot of the time what you're coming to it for is catharsis. You just want to see a woman getting revenge. Like, it doesn't need to be particularly thoughtful or even particularly good. That catharsis is kind of what makes that subgenre appealing, and there is no catharsis here. Without spoiling anything, this is a very dark depiction of not just what the kind of subgenre of rape revenge movies tends to trade in, but of kind of the culture that allows men to commit kind of like sexual assaults and be completely forgiven for it. It is a stunning movie. It really is. But I have to always warn people that if you're coming into this expecting it to be kind of I don't know, a lot of the letterbox reviews were kind of like, oh, I thought this was going to be a real girl power thing, and it's just not that at all.
Right,
It's incredibly cynical, it's incredibly dark, and it's amazing, but you won't feel good when you're done watching it. I will say that much for it.
Yeah, but it's got a point to make, doesn't it? It's sort of what you're implying there.
Absolutely.
It's not just like a girl power, we can do anything. It's actually, this is the real thing that's going on. And guess what? It's not fixed yet. So that we
absolutely. I mean, and basically, like the way Carey Mulligan's character develops, it's she's getting one over on these men, but then she stops doing that when it becomes clear that behavior is self-destructive and harming her chances of the proper relationship with Bo Burnham's character. But then she goes back to it for reasons which become clear later in the movie. But the overwhelming message is essentially that women are, to be blunt, just fucked either way. Like if they're kind of the female characters who allowed the abuses to take place, either by kind of turning a blind eye or making excuses, they are punished in this movie. Carey Mulligan's character is punished in this movie when she is very actively trying to fight against it, and Nina, who we never meet for reasons which become obvious, she is punished in this movie. And I feel like it's brilliantly written, but it is so dark and so cynical. And one of the things that really works, I think, about the cynicism of the screenplay is that it's played against this very kind of garish, like neon colored presentation. You know, she's chewing bubble gum. She's got like she almost looks like Harley Quinn. You know, she's got like like lime green and like pink nail varnish, and there's loads of like really kind of catchy girl power pop hits in the soundtrack, which I will admit,
Toxic comes from.
Well, so this is one of the only scores where I've actually heard this. So there is Toxic does come into it, but it's actually the soundtrack for Promising Young Woman is this mixture of an original score by Anthony Willis, and it's like a lot of strings, a lot of orchestral stuff. It's fantastic, and he does a kind of violin cover of Toxic in that. But then you do get like actual licensed songs in it, which unfortunately led to a point. There's a musical montage between Carey Mulligan and Bo Burnham, where I did announce out loud, oh, this song's quite catchy, and it turned out to be Stars Are Blind by Paris Hilton, which is something I'm never going to live down in terms of my musical credibility.
Stars Are Blind.
I haven't listened. Yeah. I haven't heard of that song in a long time.
I can't even remember. Like, I remember there was a couple of Paris Hilton songs out, but I can't even remember what the name of them were. Maybe that is one that I knew.
That was the one where she's kind of on a desert island, and it's got like kind of an offbeat guitar. It's basically like kind of ska, but So that sounds really interesting. I last week I talked about obviously Bo Burnham's directorial debut, Eighth Grade, and it's interesting that this film, the tone or the thing that it's depicting in the fact that she's catching these men, and like it's like sort of a very cynical take on that sort of a phenomena in the world, and sort of women are fucked either way. It's interesting actually, because Bo Burnham last week, now that we're in sort of this everyone knows what we're talking about, I can kind of talk about it. In 8th grade last week, the thing I was skirting around, because I wasn't going to talk about it for too long, I didn't want to really delve into the subject. I was talking about a moment where the character, the main character Kayla, is hanging around with older friends. And on the way home, she is getting a lift home from one of the male friends, and the older woman, who is a female friend of hers, who's a senior in high school, 4 years older than her, gets dropped off first. And there's a moment where the older woman, the older student says, "No, drop her off first. You drop her off first. I'm coming and stay in the car." And then Kayla pipes up. Obviously, the older woman is trying to protect her, and Kayla pipes up and says, "No, it's okay. It's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine." And then, obviously, she shouldn't have got out of the car, but the older woman then leaves out of the car. Kayla gets taken home. The fella stops the car in the middle of the side of the road. He gets into the back seat, and one of the most I don't know. I was gonna say cringe, but it's a cringe in the worst possible way. It's like cringe. It's like negative cringe. It's like, what's the word? I can't. Like ominous or something.
This ominous feeling that there's like tension. It was like the tension was there, and the whole time, like as soon as she said, "No, it's okay. You can get out. I'll go home with this fella. That's okay." Everyone who's watched that film is all of a sudden thinking, "What are you doing.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that people's negative thoughts towards a film like Promising Young Woman that just fully goes for it and says, this is the real problem, this needs to be done. There's always going to be that view in the world where they're saying, why are you politicizing movies? Stuff, like stupid stuff like that. And the thing that I feel is, if you want to think that it's politicizing something, and if you think it's like maybe being overblown out of proportion, watch 8th Grade. And in that moment where that young girl says to the other woman, you go out, I'm okay by myself, and that fella stops the car, gets in the back, there's not one person who, when she decides to stay in the car by herself, no matter where you fall in this argument, there's not one person whose butthole doesn't clench.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that vulnerability is terrifying. Absolutely. And imagine that was your young daughter in that situation. Like it's, and I think it's a really important thing to honestly depict. I think I understand why certain reviews I've seen of this have been like, you're depicting a situation in which rape survivors are punished. And I do see that point. I don't think the movie is not glamorizing, but I don't think the movie is seeking to kind of get any kind of sense of satisfaction from the punishment of these. I don't think it's a fetishistic thing or anything like that. I think it's just being realistic about the situation that women often face, and I think it's brutally realistic, but it really, really worked for me. And I know I shouldn't do this, but to your point about politicizing movies, a few months back I talked about excuse me. I've completely forgotten the name of the movie now. The movie now, the Rosamund Pike movie where she plays like a woman who's basically exploiting elderly people.
And Tyrion Lannister's in it. What's his name?
Yeah, it'll come back to me in a second. But I didn't particularly like that movie for other reasons, to be honest. But I saw reviews about that which accused it of misandry, of essentially being anti-man, because every man in it was essentially. It's almost, in a way, that's actually kind of the reverse of this movie, because in that movie, Rosamund Pike's character basically gets one over on everyone in that movie, man, woman, or child. It doesn't matter.
I care a lot.
I care a lot. That's it. Yeah. So
Peter Dinklage is the other thing.
Peter Dinklage, Tyrion Lannister. I mean, come on, we all know what you meant. Yeah. Whereas in this, I haven't seen any reviews accusing it of being anti-man, even though pretty much every male character in this is in some way complicit. I suppose possibly part of the reason for that is because every female character is partially complicit. So you've got, I mentioned this murderer's row of talent, but you've got Clancy Brown, like is her dad, Alfred Molina, Jennifer Coolidge, aka Stifler's mom, is in this. Alison Brie, Max Greenfield from New Girl, Chris Lowell from Glow, and all of these characters are to some extent complicit in allowing this to happen. Even Bo Burnham's character, who's kind of positioned as this kind of lightweight, he's a doctor, he's a nice guy, he's a potential opportunity for salvation for, I put that in inverted commas again, for Cassie, because he's a legitimate relationship that could maybe focus her energy towards something that's good for her. Even he isn't as perfect as he seems. And talking about Bo Burnham's directorial debut last week, I think he's phenomenal in this movie. The way he's able to kind of very subtly turn from the kind of fairy tale pop music in the background love interest to something a little bit darker without it feeling unrealistic is phenomenal. But again, this I can't recommend this to everyone, because obviously it's dealing with some pretty heavy, pretty sensitive subject matter. But if you're in the mood for something very dark and very cynical with these kind of like wonderfully dovetailing themes and plot lines, it was phenomenal. It's well worth checking out.
Yeah, and just to put a pin on the whole, because we sort of dribbled out of that politicizing discussion. To put a pin in that, something that I've always believed is everything is politicized if it matters.
Oh, yeah.
Politics are morals. So if you don't want politics in something, you only ever really have that reaction to something when you're maybe questioning whether you want to think about it enough more or not. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to say like everyone who said that about this film is a terrible person. Obviously not. But I think that when you feel uncomfortable about something being depicted in a film, it maybe speaks to a larger thing going on that maybe requires reflection, we'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really annoys me the like keep your politics out of my art argument, to be honest, because all art is inherently political, even if you don't mean it to be. I always use the example, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you know the Schwarzenegger movie Commando in the 80s?
I know it, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dumb movie. But I mean, even a movie like that has something to say about 80s politics and society, even though it's a stupid action movie and it doesn't mean to. So this idea that like some movies should just be just a bit of dumb fun. They can be a bit of dumb fun, and that's fine. But every piece of art has something to say politically and socially about the context in which it was made. And something like this is super important for that, I think.
And I think it only seems to go one way. Not entirely. Nothing is completely polar, in that way. But I will say that when you watch a film that's all about the American dream and about someone, going and becoming rich, no one was talking. Maybe they were. Maybe I just didn't look up. But people weren't talking about. I know people were saying about the Wolf of Wall Street. Were saying that man shouldn't have been maybe glamorized in the way he was. But I don't think anyone accused the Wolf of Wall Street of being a political thing. Whereas if you think about it, if you're portraying that lifestyle in the and how great it is to have that much money and stuff, surely that's politicizing it too.
Yeah.
Like every time you watch a sports film where the team wins at the end and it's all they buy all these huge players and like the film Draft Day. Is that a political thing? Because that's a fully corporate league that's like drafting these players and like they basically the players have to go where you draft them. Everything is political. Everything is political. So just because it's sort of against the grain of what Hollywood has been doing historically to shine the light on issues that haven't been that haven't had the light shine on them doesn't mean it's not important. So
no, absolutely. I love the keep your politics out of my art. It's like, are you sure you know what art is? Like, It's kind of important to art, really. But yeah, so that's Promising Young Woman. Well worth checking out, but just go in pre-warned. And I'm gonna lighten the tone now.
Yay.
We're gonna bring it back up. We not brought it down because that's a discussion worth having. I don't want to do that a disservice.
There better not be any politics in this one, Konrad.
Oh, listen, if you are sick of big fish eating people in lakes, then this movie's got a message for you. This is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I'm going to lead with that. I watched it because my partner is a big fan of movies where you have like monsters in the sea eating people, like Jaws and stuff like that.
The Meg.
The Meg, exactly, like the Meg. She's a big fan of the Meg. We saw this. I spotted it on Netflix, and I was like, "Oh, that looks like your kind of movie. Let's watch that together." And it's got Griffin Newman in it, who I know from The Tick, the live action version of The Tick. So I was like, "Oh, he's funny. We'll watch this." This is 2013's Beneath. So this is. I don't even really know where to start with this. This is one of the most incomprehensibly badly written movies I have ever seen. I don't understand why any of the characters in this do what they do at any time. So that there's one character who the movie opens with him in this weird kind of shack full of like fetishes and stuff like that, and he grabs like this kind of shark tooth, or well, as it turns out, it's probably giant fish tooth. I don't know what kind of fish it is. Necklace off of the wall and heads out. And it turns out he is meeting up with a group of high school friends to go to hang out at a cabin for a weekend or something. And there's tension in the group. There's love triangles. There's all sorts of things going on. But this character who's in this creepy cabin, like when we first meet him, full of skulls and weird models, and picking up this necklace, he tries to give this necklace to a girl that he's clearly interested in, and tells her that it will protect her. She rejects it, says, I don't know what you're talking about, you're being weird. And then later in the movie, he explains that he didn't actually know about what turns out to be the sort of crux of the movie, which is there's a giant fish in the lake and it's going to kill you all. But this necklace protects you from that giant fish. But he doesn't know that the necklace was going to protect you from the giant fish. So why was he trying to give it to her for protection at the beginning of the movie? And then to add insult to injury, the fucking magic of this necklace is just never explained. It's just like, I don't know, it's a magic necklace that stops the fish from attacking you. It just never, like, it's never mentioned. It's just a MacGuffin that is magical for some reason. It allows whoever's holding it to get back to shore safely. Like, none of the characters in this movie seem to like each other, which begs the question: why are you all going on a fishing trip together? And they're all just complete pieces of shit who are cheating on each other or lying to each other, which begs the question: who am I supposed to root for in this movie? Personally, I was rooting for the fish from about the 20 minutes in, and it's staggeringly bad. So the plot, insofar as there is one, is essentially they go out on the lake. Some of them decide they want to start swimming on the lake, and they get attacked, and then they keep using their oars to try and fight off this fish that's attacking them, and like jamming it in its mouth, which it then breaks, so then they can't move their boat, apparently, because that's the only way to paddle is with 2 oars. And they have to start voting people off of the boat, like based on like a grim meritocracy.
This sounds like an episode of Survivor.
It is very much an episode of Survivor, and in fact, actually, the kind of acting quality that you're going to see here is on par, I would say, with Survivor. So there's a great bit like after the first death, and in fact, it recurs several times throughout the movie. One of the characters just shouts at the fish, "What do you want?" Which is like, what? I mean, it's a fish. I don't know.
Well,
like, it wants to eat you, I guess.
Did it answer?
No, it did nothing. It just swam around because it's a fish.
So how big are these fish?
It's not like that. It's not even that big. It's about the size of a tuna, and it's got like
just
big
one
buggy
fish,
eyes.
or is it like just one fish?
Just one fish.
One fish.
Kind of big bug-eyed fish. It looks like something out of a 50s sci-fi. I loved it. It's terrible.
Just cast a line.
Yeah, well, exactly. And actually, they do at one point. They could have caught it. I'm convinced of that. But there's also a great bit where they try to sort of distract it by pushing the body of one of their now dead friends who gets bitten and then bleeds out in the boat. They push her into the lake and say she's going to a better place while her corpse is devoured by this by this fish. It's like, who wrote this? Did you understand what you're writing?
Just put like a crab, just like a crabbing net, or like, a crab catching net,
just anything
in the water.
There's a bit where they decide to try and distract it with food, so they're like popping open like packets of crisps and just throwing them into the water.
That's all it wanted. It just wanted some food.
Yeah, it just wanted some salt and vinegar crisps. This is a nightmare, this movie, and it's the pacing is terrible. The way it's shot is insane. So like basically they go through this Lord of the Flies voting each other off the boat thing, and it's clear from the way it's shot that they are at no point in this movie more than 30 seconds swim away from the edge of the shore. But they keep on throwing people into the lake and then paddling with their hands and then having to stop and vote other people off because apparently they're not moving fast enough. And they also keep on being like, oh, are we moving in circles? I don't know if we're moving in a straight line. When it's like, you can see the shore. Just like aim for like the going in circles thing only works if you're in like the middle of the ocean and don't have a point of reference. When you can see the shore, just like, oh, aim for that tree. It doesn't make any. This is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It was, I guess, funny because of how bad it was, but it was hard. It was hard work watching this.
Well, the director of this is a fella called Larry Fessenden, and
yeah,
it seems like he's made a career. Now, there's one or two things I'm seeing here which are a bit different. Like, he did The Dead Don't Die with Bill Murray, which was kind of like a horror-y thing too.
Yeah.
He did The Mountain.
Was that the one with that was the one with Kylo Ren, right? The Dead Don't Die.
Yeah. I actually want to see that. I like Adam Driver as an actor.
Adam Driver, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. He also did The Mountain, which had, what do you call him in it? Jeff Goldblum. I was going to do this. Couldn't remember his name.
Was that a dinosaur?
No, that's Jeff Goldblum explaining something.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he's had a few high spots, it seems, but for the most part, this director seems to have just every year he seems to
churns out a stinker.
Yeah, he seems to very much. Well, he was an actor in those things, so he's an actor and a director. but he seems to be very much into the low budget horror, and he's just been putting stuff out since the 80s.
Yeah, I've never heard of Larry Fessenden before. I don't think I've ever seen one of his films. I don't think I'll ever watch one again based on this.
He got a short film 2008 called Santa Claus.
How's
but
Claus
the Claus
spelled?
Yeah, you give you two guesses how Claus is spelled.
Yeah, okay.
You
I feel like that's
Fessenden.
not the only that's not the only horror movie that's done that. I feel I'm sure there's another one that's done that, but yeah, I mean, it's really hard to fuck up like a monster movie. I feel like you just have to make the kills interesting. Don't get too bogged down in the character drama, and
don't talk about not knowing where you are when you're in the middle of a lake.
Yeah, when you can clearly when the lake is at most a minute across. Like, it's not Lake Victoria here, guys. It's you know, you're like it's more of a pond than a lake, really. But this is just, it's staggeringly bad. It's incompetent at every level, and I was sad to see Griffin Newman in this because he's really funny in The Tick, and he was shocking in this. It was nice actually to see. Have you ever seen Ace Ventura: Pet Detective?
Oh, hundreds of times. Well, tens of times.
You know his landlord in the Yes Satan bit?
Yeah.
I think that's him. That's a guy called Mark Margolis, and he shows up in this for about 5 minutes and suggests... So I'm not fully sure what he was suggesting, but he seems to imply that there's some relationship between the kid with the necklace and the fish in the river, as if... And my partner thought this as well as me, so it's not just me being mental. The way that it's described, I could have sworn that he was implying that the fish was that kid's father, which I don't understand how that works, but that seemed to be what the movie was implying to both of us.
Yeah. Okay. It does sound a bit curious. This film, it's not really done the rounds of movies so bad it's good.
No.
So it's maybe just really bad. That actor, Mark Margolis, I knew I'd heard his name before. Yes, he was in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, Mr. Shickadance, but he was also Mr. Shickadance. But he was also. Do you remember him from Breaking Bad?
Yeah, he was the guy in the wheelchair in Breaking Bad. Which is, it's great. I like. He's a bit like He's a bit like Kevin Dunn, who he talks about all the way back. We talks about Small Soldiers, where he just shows up in stuff, and it's like, we know what kind of characters this guy's going to play. He's going to be a grumpy old man because he's looked that way for about 50 years by the looks of things.
Yeah, like always in Breaking Bad, whenever they do like the flashbacks and it's him when he's younger, it's like, hang on, I thought this man was 90 years old.
Yeah, they do not have to do any kind of, or they chose not to do any de-aging on Mark Margolis at all. It's just like, he's looked this way since the 70s. Like, that's what he looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I've just seen it here. He's 81 now. He's around 81, 82 years old. So he's not far away from 90, actually.
No.
Okay, so that was your second one.
Yep.
Now, you did say that you've watched more than me this week. That's true. So everyone, it's happened, guys. It's the second worst it could be due to my busy life with lots of things going on, family, work, everything like that. I've watched one film this week.
Nice.
So
it's going to be a cracker.
I've tried to contribute to the conversation with Konrad so far. I will continue to do so with it as well, just to break up that lovely velvety tone of Konrad's voice with my very pitchy Australian coming in. But hopefully, because I'm still a part of this podcast, Konrad.
You're a welcome addition. A welcome addition. Like I'm looking forward to discussing this next one. I do know what it is. I'm not going to give it away, but don't you worry about that.
Well, I'm going to say that whether to disappoint or not disappoint, because I've only got one watch this week, I'm imagining people will like it if they didn't know what it was. Whereas obviously everyone's expecting me to watch Iron Man 3. We didn't watch that this week yet. We're going to watch that for next week. So I think next week is going to be a movie diary, but the week after that we'll talk about that. So I'll watch Iron Man 3 for next week. We didn't get a chance. Sorry, guys. I'm actually going to be honest with you. I kind of cheated. I watched the first 3 quarters of the Avengers for last week, and then with Ema, and then Ema wasn't able to watch the rest, so I finished it by myself. And then we went back this week and finished off the Avengers, which Ema hasn't seen the rest of it yet.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of watched the Avengers kind of as well this week, but we'd already talked about that last week. So anyway,
we'll talk about it again. It's a great movie.
It's a very good movie. Not as good as the next one. Actually, no, I can't even keep that up. So the film I watched this week is the little-known classic. No, not a classic. It is the film I Love You, Beth Cooper.
Yeah.
Now I don't know why I chose to watch this. I was sort of all by myself. You know, the kids are in bed. Ema was sort of doing some work in the other room, but also just, you know, tending towards bed. And I thought, I got to get at least one film watched for the podcast this week. So I went looking through Disney's new Star app, or whatever you call it. It's Disney Plus app, but Star on the Disney Plus app, because they have lots of adult content there now. So I was looking through there, trying to see something to watch, and I have no idea why. Maybe it was Hayden Panettiere's lovely blue eyes. Maybe it was the fact that Chris Columbus is the director. Something drew me to watching I Love You, Beth Cooper. I have no idea. So I just put it on, and let me tell you, it was a load of dog shit.
Who could have seen that coming?
Yeah, like, okay, so Chris Columbus, you might remember Chris Columbus for his directorial ventures such as Harry Potter 1, Harry Potter 2,
aka the worst Harry Potter movies.
Yep, exactly. The Help.
I never saw The Help.
Well, he was a producer of The Help, to be fair. I don't know if he actually directed it. Let's just double check here. No, he didn't. He did Rent. He did everyone's favorite Pixels. So okay,
did Bicentennial Man, which my partner loves, and I hate that movie.
I have a soft spot for it just because of nostalgic reasons. I watched it when I was quite young.
How dare that goddamn movie be as long as it is? That's my opinion.
I haven't watched it since I watched it on VHS at the age of like 10, so I need to probably rewatch that. 9 Months, which is a Hugh Grant classic, which I actually like more than I should, which we know about like other Hugh Grant stuff as well. And Mrs. Doubtfire, Home Alone 2. Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire are probably his biggest, and the things that have kept him getting work all these years. This was a weird departure from his usual films. I mean, maybe you could say Rent was the most sort of off-brand for Chris Columbus in his career. Or maybe the upcoming Five Nights at Freddy's will be his most
shit, is he doing that? Yeah. Oh my god. Chris Columbus, what are you doing?
Yeah, so in 2000 and... I have to remind myself again now. 2009, he decided for some reason to make like a coming-of-age teen film. It's one of those classic, you know, we've only got one night left of high school, you know, like that type of film. Yeah, Chris Columbus thought the genre wasn't full up yet. Like,
he had something to add.
He had something to add to it. So he made this film, and it starts off with a character who goes by the name of, let me see, Dennis Kuverman, classic, played by Paul Rust. And I just want to say, Paul Rust, at the time of making this film, was 30 years old.
That's textbook. Absolutely textbook for a high school coming of age movie.
But it wasn't like Tom Welling when he made Smallville, who was like meant to be 14 and he was like 28. Yeah. Like part of you is thinking, oh, maybe he is an alien after all. Like Paul Rust here, like you know, like sometimes like they'll shoot the scene from one angle and it's like maybe he looks like an 18-year-old. The makeup's done in a certain way, maybe. And then it cuts to a different angle of the same scene, and he just looks 40 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at pictures. To be honest, I don't really know Paul Rust from anything, but I've looked at some pictures of him now, and admittedly, that's 12 years on, but it's like, this man could be in his 50s now. Like, he has not aged gracefully, let's say.
But he's, you know, when you're thinking of a love interest for the young and upcoming, well, no, she's not upcoming, really. She was in...
She was like 20 at that point. She was in Heroes.
She was in Remember the Titans. Like, let's be honest.
So no, I do not remember her from, ironically enough, from Remember the Titans.
She's the little girl. She's the little girl. The little girl who's like the daughter of the assistant coach.
Oh, okay, yeah, fine.
She also plays the babysitter. She also plays the babysitter in what do you call it? Malcolm in the Middle as well.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so she was sort of really in her heyday due to Heroes and stuff. Like there was a time, like the Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Hayden Panettiere years were a dream. Let's be honest.
Those were halcyon days. Like when Joseph Gordon-Levitt had the world at his feet, and Hayden Panettiere was in every film. Well, in fact, she wasn't in every film, but she was in enough films that we were like, she's going to be the next big thing.
Yeah, she was the world's sweetheart at that point, and Of course, you cast her as a cheerleader. So she plays Beth
Sure.
Cooper, the one who is loved in the title. And Paul Rust plays Dennis Kuverman, who is a nerd, of course.
Yeah,
and
he wears glasses, so that goes without saying.
Yep, and he gets to give the speech at the graduation, which, what do they call that? I don't know.
Oh, like the
Valedictorian?
yeah, I think is that what a valedictorian is? I've heard that word before. I've never really asked what a valedictorian actually is.
Yeah, well, anyway, he gives a speech, and his friend convinces him. His friend's named Rich Munch, by the way. Convinces him to.
That's a great.
Convinces him to give a speech, and in that speech, talk about how we all should say things that we've always wanted to say but never had the balls to say. And he says, "I love you, Beth Cooper," and she's never talked to him. And he talks about how he was like, he sat behind her in every class, and he's in love with her. Now, first off, this has the massive trope of teen films. He doesn't love her.
Of just declaring unwanted affection.
Yeah, he's infatuated with her, right? Okay.
Her name is Noelle. I'm a dream.
That's exactly it, right? So he loves her, and wouldn't you know it? See, in real life, if this guy did this nerd who'd never talked to the head cheerleader
laughed
before,
out of the school,
whose boyfriend is like a 2 years older guy who's in the army, who's come back. He's of course he is. He's in the army. He's come back just for the night. He's watching her get graduated, and he doesn't get beaten up. He almost does. They try very hard to. Let's just say that.
I bet her army boyfriend's a real piece of shit.
Yeah, like the school.
Just to make it easy. You don't make that character complicated at all. Just make him a bad guy.
That's the weird thing as well, is all the bullies, were like these army guys who were like 3 years older. The rest of the year group, like in the school, the rest of like the cohort, just seemed to be just nothing, like neutral. They didn't care. Like, what's the chances of there was like 400 people there? What's the chances of not having a little clique of bullies in that? Why?
Someone would have taken it. If you announce that you love a girl you've never spoken to before at a public speaking event, you will be bullied mercilessly at high school, I imagine.
Yeah. So basically, it starts a film of like the last night. Of course, we all know how it goes. They end up together. Of course they do. Hayden Panettiere and her friends come around to their party, which is literally just them and a load of snacks. And then the boyfriend is chasing them through the night, and it's just this rip-roaring fun night where they're all running through the thing, discovering their sexuality, having showers together. Of course. Dennis Kuverman, the nerd guy, announces whenever he sees Beth Cooper kiss the guy from the guy who works at the drugstore, this like 30-year-old overweight man. She kisses him, not on screen, I will say. That's some audiences don't want to see that. She kisses him to get so that they are able to drink the beer. They can get the beer from the shop, and he says aloud in the car amongst her two friends and his friend Rich Munch, and there's 5 of them in the car. He says aloud, "She's not Beth Cooper." So he idealized her in his mind.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like you were talking about that promising young woman thing. There's not really anything in this film in terms of sexual abuse or anything like that. But there is this idea that the nerd sort of the nerdy fella who almost feels entitled.
Yeah.
To the
You declared your love.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the word, Konrad, but there's a nerdy fella who hasn't never talked to this one before, but he almost in a way feels entitled to her attention. Okay,
Yep.
So I'll leave that there. But there is that feeling in this film, definitely. Okay, is it funny? No.
Okay, that's good.
Are the characters lovable? No. I'm not gonna lie. It took me back to my teenage years when I was watching Hayden Panettiere on the screen. I mean, she's got a weird thing. There's like 3 or 4. I've never watched her in Nashville, so I don't know if she's still the same. But it's like every line she delivers is the exact same. She I'm not gonna say that she's a bad actor, but there's something about her which just, I don't know. One of those actors I can never see her as anything else.
Her career has reflected her talents, I'm going to say, and I'm openly not a big fan of that Nashville show. I think I said to you before we started recording that I really like the movie Nashville. It's this like amazing kind of cross section of kind of American society and culture in the 70s. It just kind of jumps between all these interweaving stories and plot lines. And as far as I can tell, the TV show is, what if there was an old country singer lady and she was trying to get her groove back and Hayden Panettiere was stealing her guitarist, which I was like, that doesn't happen in the movie. I don't understand why this is based on Nashville at all, to be honest.
Or maybe it's just another show. Is it actually based on it, or is it just another show named after a city?
I don't know. That's to be fair, but I assumed it was because Nashville also kind of like has politics and a lot of like country music in it. So I assumed it was pulling from the same source material, but for all intents and purposes, they are not related in any way beyond both being set in Nashville.
Yeah. Okay. So I will say, I don't understand why this film was made, because 2009. Let's look 2 years before that. Was the seminal not the seminal, actually. It wasn't maybe the best one ever made, but it was definitely the one was like, right, okay, we've done this in a new way, let's stop. 2 years before this, Superbad came out. Superbad is, for me, one of the best, and should be, in my opinion, a full stop on the genre of these one last night of high school films. Like, I'm not going to say there aren't other good ones. Of course there are. But I don't really know what Chris Columbus is thinking he's adding to the genre here in 2009, 2 years after. There's nothing. It's not very risque. It's not very funny. He tries in a way to have. Okay, there's a storyline in this film, and this is the last thing I'll say about it because I'm talking too much about this crap film. There's a storyline in this film. Rich Munch, I've mentioned him before. Rich Munch, played by Jack Carpenter. In the very beginning of this film, whenever Dennis Kooverman is giving his speech, and he's talking all about how he loves Beth Cooper, and he's going around other people in the school and saying things that he always wanted to say about them. But he's being really mean, right?
Yeah.
Really, really mean guy. He says something about his best friend. He says, why doesn't he just come out the closet? In front of the school. Okay? In front of the school.
Oh,
and then, for the rest of the film... Now, I this is very hot water here, right? I don't know where to tread on this. Because I'm just going to come out and say something. I understand a correlation between people feeling that men who are a little bit more camp, a little bit more feminine, trend towards being homosexual. I understand people's imaginings of that, right? I just want to say, this character, there's no way of knowing what his sexuality is from his performance.
Yeah.
Okay? And even at that, there's no way of knowing anyone's sexuality from their performance in either direction. But I'll just say, there was nothing. They weren't even doing the stereotypical Hollywood, this is a gay man. They weren't even doing that.
Yeah.
They just
didn't even have the decency to make him a stereotype.
The whole way through the film, everyone just kept saying, even people who weren't his friends, just kept saying, he's gay. And he's just like, what are you talking about? It's like, you're gay. It's like they didn't want to actually put the work into the character, so they just had everyone else say that he's gay. And then at the end of the film, when he comes out and says, I think I'm gay, it's like, oh, he is. He's admitted it to himself. He's come out of the closet. It's like, why on earth are we prodding this man? Why are we forcing this man to come to terms with his sexuality for our account? Why
don't
are we
out other people? It's not a cool thing to do.
Why? And at the end of the thing, it's like I'm gay or whatever. He's like, yeah, well, there we go, and he gives him a hug or whatever. I'm like, mate, you can't act like the cool friend now. You said in front of the school at the start that he needs to come out of the closet. As well as that, Konrad, in a very interesting way, take on this sort of coming to terms with his sexuality, this man coming out as gay. In the climax of this film, no pun intended, he actually has sex with two women. Okay?
Okay.
And they were building it up and building it up and building up. He's gay and he's not going to feel any attraction towards them. He was in the shower with them and they asked him, like, why didn't you look like you were in the shower with women, if you get what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't you sort of,
why weren't you aroused?
Why didn't you rise to meet us? And he was like, oh, I was just trying to be a gentleman. And then they started like these two women, as always happens, like the last day of secondary school, last day of high school, Conrad. Of course, there's gonna be two women throwing themselves at you. Every young man who gets this, right?
Yeah, but we all experience that.
We all experience that. But basically, they start like sort of getting on him, we'll say. And there's a moment where you're like, okay, so this is gonna be the big finish of the film. He's not gonna feel anything to these two women trying to. But no, they do have sex, and he does get through it, and then it's like, and then they're like, I thought you were gay. He's like, well, I thought I was too. Literally, they say that, and then the next scene, or 2 scenes later or whatever, the girls drop them off. It's like the big end of the film, and he just turns to his mate and goes, I think I'm gay. It's like,
okay,
what's going on here, Chris Columbus?
This it's just such a, those kind of plot lines are always so lazy. Like it's just, and it's a very like kind of mid to late 2000s trope of being like, oh, we're like slightly progressive, but not progressive enough to actually write this character in a decent way. So we're just going to have them come out at the end of the movie, and that's going to be their happy ending, regardless of what's come before it in this movie. Yep. Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a train wreck. It didn't make its budget back, fortunately. I just had to go and check to make sure. I'd like to kind of reaffirm my faith in humanity that it didn't make it.
Well, I've just given it a view.
Yep. There you go. So somewhere like a $5 check has just been mailed to Chris Columbus, and that's gonna feed him for another day.
I've just funded 5 Nights at Freddy's. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's straight into the 5 Nights at Freddy's fund. There is actually, funnily enough, I was looking through the cast of this of I Love You, Beth Cooper, and I thought I recognised the face of a character. So there's a character in this movie called, so I've not seen it, but her name is Valley Woolley. Does that ring any bells to you?
Okay, I think it's one of the friends, possibly.
Okay, yeah. I mean, she was probably like quite a young woman at the time, but she's played by Marie Avgeropoulos. And funnily enough, she was also in a movie that I watched this week, which that's pretty unlikely, to be honest, considering when this movie was made. So I think that's quite a natural segue into me talking about another terrible movie that I watched this week, which is 2020's Jiu Jitsu. It's directed by Dimitri Logothetis, who I hasn't really done too much before. It's also written by him and someone else called Jim McGrath, and it's a bad Nicolas Cage film. That's kind of what I'm going to lead with on this. It's so okay. The first thing I'll say about this movie, and so actually the very first thing I'll say to explain that segue is that Maria Avgeropoulos plays an army intelligence agent who's basically just woman in that film. Like that's her character. She doesn't seem to really serve any other purpose than that, and she's not a particularly good fit for the role either. So it's not there's nothing really lost in that. The next thing I will say is I can't claim to be an expert on any form of martial arts or indeed physical exercise for that matter, but I don't think jiu-jitsu involves like sword fighting with an alien that is essentially the Predator. But that's what this movie is about. So just to briefly give our listeners and you a glimpse into how I followed the plot of this movie. Basically, a comet turns up. We see Nicolas Cage in like a rice paddy hat scouring the sea for a man who has been chased by shurikens on an island and has thrown himself off a cliff into the sea. Nicolas Cage finds him and gives him to some Burmese fishermen who nurse him back to health. He then staggers out of their home into a US Army base in Burma. But he has amnesia and doesn't remember who he is. The US Army stuff is almost completely irrelevant to the entire plot, because essentially what happens is he's found by this gang of martial artists, almost all of whom are very good martial artists, including the lead actually. And it's revealed that he has the chosen jiu-jitsu, which is what will be required to fight an intergalactic alien called Brax, who turns up, I think it's every 10 years or something like that, when the comet turns up to fight the jiu-jitsu masters of Earth. If they don't fight him, then he will basically destroy the Earth or something. And if that sounds like a nonsense plot, then you're absolutely right. I'm right there with you.
It sounds like it's like a film called Basketball, and the only thing that has anything to do with basketball is that the main character uses a ball-like bomb to throw at people.
Yeah, that is how much, like, I'm pretty sure Jiu Jitsu is like grapples and holds. And at one point in this movie, the main character
judo.
does
That's judo, I think.
Well, I think Jiu Jitsu and Judo are quite similar to each other. I might be completely wrong. But I mean, at one point in this movie, the main character does a literal Hurricane Rana, which I was like, that is definitely not a Jiu Jitsu move, because that's
luchador.
That's lucha libre, which isn't a real martial art. So the lead, the first thing I'll say about this movie is, if you actually just look at it in the cold light of day, look at the cast. The lead is played by a guy called Alain Moussi, who was just a stuntman before this, and you can tell he's obviously a very good martial artist. He is a garbage actor, and you've got Nicolas Cage just turns up, chews the scenery, collects his paycheck in the way that Nicolas Cage does. I'll come back to him in a second, because his scene in this is his scenes in this are pretty special. Even as someone who doesn't really like the "lol Nicolas Cage does bad movies" meme, he was actually quite funny in this. But the martial artists they've got, like Tony Jaa from Ong Bak. Rick
I love Ong Bak.
Ong Bak's very good. Rick Yoon, who's in like Ninja Assassin, he's in a load of like kind of Western Eastern crossover martial arts movies. Yeah. Frank Grillo, who is in a lot of the Marvel movies, he's great. And there's a ton of really talented martial artists in this, and they try to shoot it in the sort of John Wick style, like the wide angle shots to let the choreography speak for itself. Mm-hmm. The choreography is decent, but the CGI blood effects are terrible. There's way too much shaky cam, which kind of defeats the whole object of doing the wide shots in the first place, because it's kind of hard to follow things. And there's some bizarre in fact, there's one in particular bizarre fight scene early on where the camera shifts from a wide angle shot into a first person shot of the main character as he's fighting. He gets punched, so the fist comes directly towards the screen. The camera falls down, but then we see the character whose first person we were just inhabiting carrying on fighting. You mean
point of view? Like actually point
yeah,
of view?
It's like a point of view shot. So it gets punched, the camera falls down, but then we see the character whose point of view we were just in, without a cut, carry on fighting in the shot while the camera is on the ground. Then the camera gets back up, jumps back into the character who is fighting, and then starts following him around, but then the character steps out of the point of view again. And it's like, that doesn't work. You can't say this is a point of view shot and then without a cut just be like, I stopped being a point of view shot now. Okay, it's so jarring and an awful decision. I don't know who made that decision, but
like that's mental to me. So what are they imagining? Like, so
it makes no sense. It's like, are we in point of view or not?
Whenever you're in the head of them, and the idea is you're meant to imagine you're their eyes, but then if you see them walk around, it's so fourth wall breaking that you're just clearly thinking, well, there's a camera there, you know?
Yeah, well, and I genuinely get the impression that Logothesis just made this movie trying to do as much weird stuff with the camera as he could think of without really thinking about why he was doing it. So the point of view shot is a great example. There's another one where they use what's called a snorri cam. So it's essentially like a chest rig with the camera pointing directly at the actor's face.
Right.
But they do it in a lot of, like, you know, extreme sports kind of videos and and for one scene, they use it all the time. Like, several different actors have it. Never shows up again in the movie. It doesn't really make any sense why they use it. And it's just like, every scene it's like, oh, let's do this time. Oh, let's do this time. There's no kind of reasoning employed for why they would use these things. And the CGI is garbage. So there's scenes where the Brax, who is literally just a predator, he literally has like thermoptic camouflage, is like throwing shurikens in the jungle at the US Army guys. And it's clear that they weren't directed on where these shurikens were coming from or who was having them thrown at them, because all the actors are just standing there as these shurikens fly within inches of their face. It's terrible. It's just completely immersion breaking. And then, so the movie's pretty bad up until that point. Then the main character falls into a hole in the ground, meets Nicolas Cage, literally just falls through a hole in the ground. Nicolas Cage is in there. He monologues about making hats out of newspapers and how that's his, like, while fighting the main character, and just talks absolute nonsense for about 5 minutes, and then they just like decide to be on the same side. And it's really funny again because obviously this movie was made by people who were into cool stunts with an idea, with that kind of like John Wick idea of like, okay, we're going to do cool choreography, we've got great martial artists, we're going to let them do what they want to do, and that works to a certain extent. But then when Nicolas Cage shows up, it's like, okay, he clearly isn't in physical shape to do this, and it's really noticeable that every fight scene, apart from the ones with Nicolas Cage in, are shot in this like wide angle style, and the Nicolas Cage ones, every time anything physical happens, it cuts like back to some dark shot with someone who's clearly not Nicolas Cage and just someone wearing a wig dressed like him, like rolls over a table, and then Nicolas Cage like pops back up into the close up like and it's just it's so obvious that it's not him doing the stunts, and it's so bad. This movie is it is funny because of how bad it is and how derivative it is of its that what it's pulling from it, but it's a hard watch. I'm not sure if it falls into so bad it's good category, to be honest.
To be honest with you, every time I think of Nicolas Cage, I probably said this on a podcast before, I don't know, I've seen his grave. Like
the mausoleum.
This man is so strange. Like,
yeah,
it's not just that he's weirdly has no taste in the projects that he chooses. I don't know what's going on.
Well, I think he owes a bunch of back taxes, so he just has to take whatever roles are offered to him. That's I'm not sure if that's apocryphal, but that's what I've heard about him.
Surely he can be a little bit picky. Like,
yeah, well, this is what I mean about like not really liking the meme about Nicolas Cage being like, oh, he just makes terrible movies, because at some point, like, I don't mind someone who just makes. We talked about it a bit with Robert De Niro, a few weeks back. Where I don't mind someone making movies for the money, but you can have a little discerning, you can be a little bit discerning about your choice. Whereas the movies he makes now are almost always just complete trash. Like, they're not even. There's no redeeming qualities in them, and this has a couple, because, as I say, a lot of talented martial artists in this. Some of the fight scenes are pretty good, but his stuff in it is just. I feel like he's in this movie because the director is like, lol, Nicolas Cage, as opposed to because he brings anything to the role, which is kind of insulting to the viewer's intelligence.
I honestly think there's a big difference between the Robert De Niro and the Nicolas Cage thing. Robert De Niro is choosing to do a different genre of films, which are inherently... They're going to have a lot of issues with them, inherently. Yeah. Like, the family films he's chosen to do are not the same meaty roles, right? That's a whole other discussion than Nicolas Cage, who's literally doing B movies. You know, he's went from what could be considered an A-list or B-list actor to doing these films, which it's a question of whether they'll even get in the cinema, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think this got a cinematic release. I think it was... straight to streaming services.
Very strange. Very strange. The director, Dimitri Logothetis, he's been going since the 80s. And well, one thing, he's done a few films about called Kickboxer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he did a bunch of the Kickboxer movies, all of which are garbage as well.
Oh, I just will say, Konrad, this will interest you. While I was looking at Kickboxer Retaliation 2018 there, one of the posters for it is Ronaldinho, the football player.
What?
Just a picture of his face, and it says Kickboxer Retaliation. So
are we to understand that Ronaldinho is in that movie?
Yes, he is, and
excellent.
And it doesn't even say as himself. I know Ronaldinho means like little Ronaldo or little Ronald, so I understand that. But he's credited as a character called Ronaldo, which is not his name he goes by. So I don't think he's playing himself. I think he's literally... It must be because I think Ronaldinho... Did he go to prison? I think... So, like, I think he's
he got into some trouble.
Yeah, he's hardened up now. And they're like, well, let's get him in this film about underground kickboxing.
He weighs like 100 pounds. Like, he's not threatening in the slightest.
Yeah, Ronaldinho's in.
This is like when Kurt Angle showed up as Cobra in Fighter, except way dumber. That was fine because Kurt Angle looks like he could kill you, whereas like Ronaldinho looks like someone who really enjoys cocaine.
Kurt Angle was an Olympic gold medalist for wrestling, so it makes sense that he's going to play an MMA fighter. Ronaldinho was a football player known for his finesse and sort of
his wayfish figure.
His wayfish figure. Whereas he's in a film about underground kickboxing, Konrad.
listen, maybe he's like Bruce Lee. You know, he's really like wiry and dangerous. That sounds dreadful. I can't believe that this guy. This feels like a movie that was the directorial debut because of how much dumb shit he's doing with the camera.
Well, when you were saying that to me, it sounded like he came from making lots of short movies, and it came from like, you know, he's used to every time he goes to the set doing a different style. You know, that's what it sounded to me. You know, it's like
it's like he's finally got a budget, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna get a steady cam. And didn't stop to think why. But yeah, I mean, that's Jiu Jitsu. I think it's on Netflix. It is garbage, but you know, if you want to watch if you're the kind of person who enjoys Nicolas Cage movies for how stupid they are for the most part, you'll probably enjoy that. Just be aware that it's not good, and you should feel bad for enjoying those kinds of movies.
And if you start it and you're watching the first few seconds and you don't like it, that's all right. You can be gone in 60 seconds.
Nice. That's a reference to another Nicolas Cage movie. For
Got
those of you who don't know, I'm trying to think. That man's a real national treasure. Anyway, so I'm gonna close this off with a positive now because I started with a good one. I've railed against bad ones. I'm gonna just quickly talk about a good one.
Face Off. Sorry,
Face Off. It's great.
I get another Nicolas Cage reference in there.
I love
Face Off.
I hate to see you leave, but I love to I hate to see you go, but I love to watch you leave. Is that what he says in that movie? I can't remember.
Well, that's a very well-known saying. I don't know if it was originally from that movie, but
is it? Okay.
It's obviously originally from something, so that could be it.
That movie. That my fun bit of a Face Off trivia is that, you know, like the boots they wear in like the high-tech prison in that, they were props from the Super Mario Brothers movie that they just repurposed for Face Off.
Great.
Which I always love. It's great. So Bob Hoskins and Nicolas Cage have worn the same boots.
Lovely. I didn't know they were the same size.
Well, yeah, nor did I. Maybe they resized them. Who knows? Mario's quite stocky though, so I could see him with big feet. Okay, so the last movie I'm going to talk about, I was basically on board with this movie from its look alone. This is New Gods, Nezha Reborn. It's a Chinese movie directed by a guy called Ji Zhao, and it's essentially a retelling of some of the kind of like Journey to the West classical Chinese mythology, but it's set in like a sort of cyberpunk future, and the aesthetic was really the thing that got me on board with it. So it essentially tells the story of this like street punk racer, smuggler, motorbike guy in a cyberpunk future where water is more precious than money, and he runs into the son of a powerful businessman during who's like he's clearly a villain. He runs around in a limo. During which he reveals himself to be Nezha Reborn. He's like the god of rebellion, and he gets really mad, and he gets like this avatar of fire that comes out of him, and he starts beating people up. This Nezha guy is fated to bring down the Dragon King, who's like the evil corporate guy, and basically revealing it puts his family in danger, and he has to seek the aid of this like mysterious masked figure who is clearly Sun Wukong, who's like the Monkey King, to fight back. And it's basically just a rip-roaring adventure movie. I think it needed to win me round because the animation of the human characters is a little bit ropey, and it's the kind of thing where you don't appreciate how good like DreamWorks and Pixar's animation of human characters is until you watch something that's just not quite there. And this is a case of that where I was like, I'm getting a bit of an uncanny valley vibe from some of these human characters. But the aesthetic is great. I love the cyberpunk meets Journey to the West stuff. The character design is brilliant. And I will say that this does assume you know a fair bit about the story of Nezha and the Journey to the West stuff, which I don't really. I know little bits of it. And it doesn't do a great job of kind of like onboarding you to the point where there are like post-credit sequences where very, very much like the Marvel movies, where it's like, this character will be turning up next summer, and I'm like, I don't know who that is, and it, you know, it's clearly a big reveal. But the story itself is really good fun. The world design is beautiful, and it's a really fun action adventure romp, and well worth checking out if you're in the mood for something like that, really.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. Like I've watched a fair bit of Japanese animation over the years. I'd be interested to check it out to see how the Chinese one compares, and I would imagine as sort of I would imagine that there's more and more Chinese shows permeating out from into this part of the world, as there is Korean ones, and obviously Japan has been sort of very big in this part of the world for a long time now. I'm interested to see. I really want to start seeing like the differences between the different cultures over that part of the world. It's gonna be. I really want to see that now.
Well, I mean, I think they're definitely making inroads. Like the Chinese film industry or Chinese mainland film industry definitely has designs on making an indentation on the Western market, and stuff like this could definitely do it, because as I say, it's really fun to watch. It's not perfect, but I think it does a lot of stuff right. And they clearly are doing a kind of cinematic universe. And actually, funnily enough, this is one of the only movies I've ever seen where after the movie ends, it literally says at the beginning of the credits, "Stay tuned for a post-credit sequence," which, thank God, someone started doing that, because Marvel really shit the bed with like introducing stingers back into like the cinematic lexicon, and now like everyone stays till the end of every movie, which I suppose in a way is good, because it means people are actually watching the credits. But it's also just like, come on, we don't all need to wait to the end of every movie to see if Iron Man shows up.
You've got to read every single name, okay?
Yeah, exactly. They let them know that, like, you.
And I'm only half joking there. Like, my wife's in the film industry and she works in the art department, so I do actually genuinely like. Obviously, sometimes you can't stay for the credits, but I genuinely do try and stay for the credits anyway.
Oh yeah, like someone that I know who works in the film industry once told me that they always stay behind just so, like, even if only one person read your name in the credits, you could at least be like, oh yeah, someone's read that person's name in the credits. And also, it's quite like me and my partner enjoy reading the funny names. That's a little game we play.
My name, you know, is quite easy to find. Like, I've said my name on my real name online before, so go and look for it there. I love the fact that it's an Easter egg. Mine's quite a common name. Would you believe? So I've seen probably 20 of my name in credits before.
Yeah, you'd have to, when you make it big and become a famous actor, you'll need to take on a pseudonym of some description.
Maybe Anthony James.
Possibly. Yeah.
But there's also an actor called Anthony James, though. I think he passed away, though. Oh,
okay, well, there you go. It's free. It's available.
it's free. It's ready to go.
But yeah, so that's Nezha Reborn. Good fun if you're in the mood for a kind of family adventure romp. But I think that's probably going to do it for us here at the Best Movie Podcast Ever. I think we've got some good discussion out of that, which leaves us with simply one question to answer, as we always do, and that is, Anthony, what is your favourite movie this week?
Oh, jeez.
Come on. You can do what I do and just pick a random one.
No. Yeah. I do that sometimes. I'm just trying to remember the name of it. Like, my son was watching a show the other day. It was a Winnie the Pooh film. The Heffalump movie? Is that the name of it? Yeah, let's go with the Heffalump movie.
Yeah, Heffalumps are a Winnie the Pooh thing. Yeah. Great. Okay, well, that's a great movie, or maybe it's not. Well, who knows? I'm not going to.
I didn't watch enough of it though to do a kids corner on it.
I love that. Like, you watched the whole of I Love You, Beth Cooper, and hated that movie so much that you've instead listed a movie that might not even exist as your favourite movie this week. That's how much you disliked I Love You, Beth Cooper.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff. For me, it's definitely Promising Young Woman. Sometimes I make a little bit of a joke out of this, but in this case, Promising Young Woman is an excellent film. Go and see it. Join us next week for another movie diary where we'll do another one of these. Thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song. You can find links to their stuff down in the thing below. And thank you to you for listening. Please consider subscribing. Again, we are the Culture Game on YouTube. We're the best movie podcast ever on podcasting apps. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
Cut.